the shadow behind the screen. Emily had been talking to Alex online for several months. Their conversations were deep and engaging, filled with shared interests and personal revelations. Alex seemed perfect, charming, intelligent, and attentive. After weeks of chatting, they finally planned to meet in person at a cozy cafe downtown, a place Emily had chosen because of its warm atmosphere and vintage charm. As Emily walked into the cafe, her excitement was mixed with anxiety. She had carefully chosen her outfit and rehearsed a few lines in her mind. She scanned the room for someone who matched Alex's profile pictures, tall, with a confident demeanor and a friendly smile. But the cafe was crowded, and none of the faces seemed familiar. She found a quiet corner table and sat down, nervously glancing at the door every few minutes. The cafe's ambience was warm, with soft music playing in the background and the gentle hum of conversations around her. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, making Emily's wait feel interminable. Just as she was about to pull out her phone to check the time, the cafe door swung open. A man entered, and Emily's heart skipped a beat. He was tall and dressed in a long coat, with the brim of his hat casting a shadow over his face. His appearance was disheveled, unlike the polished images Alex had sent her. Despite his unkempt look, he made his way towards Emily with an unsettling smile. "Emily," he asked, his voice carrying an odd, echoing quality. "Yes, that's me," Emily replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Are you Alex?" The man nodded, his smile widening. "I'm glad to finally meet you." Emily was taken aback by his appearance and the peculiar quality of his voice, but she tried to make the best of the situation. They sat down and started talking, but the conversation was awkward. The man's responses were vague and disconnected, as if he was struggling to stay focused. Emily noticed strange things about him. Despite the warmth of the cafe, he kept his coat tightly buttoned and his hat low over his eyes. His gaze seemed to dart around nervously, and he avoided eye contact. His hands were cold and clammy when he touched the menu or reached for his coffee cup. As the evening wore on, the cafe's lights began to flicker intermittently, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Emily checked her phone and saw several missed calls and messages from her friend, who had been trying to reach her. Fear began to creep in. She noticed the man's demeanor growing more unsettling. His smile now seemed menacing, and his eyes, though hidden, glinted with an unsettling intensity. "Is everything all right?" Emily asked, trying to break the growing tension. The man leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You shouldn't have come." Emily's heart raced. She tried to stand up, but the man's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist with a grip that was both cold and unyielding. Panic surged through her. She attempted to pull away, but the man's grasp was surprisingly strong. In a burst of adrenaline, Emily yanked her wrist free and bolted towards the door. Her heart pounded in her chest as she fled the cafe. The man's voice echoed behind her, calling out her name, but she didn't stop to look back. Outside, she ran to her car, fumbled with the keys, and drove away as quickly as she could. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, and she could hardly catch her breath. The night air felt suffocating, and the streetlights seemed to cast eerie shadows on the road. Once she was safely at home, Emily called her friend and recounted the night's events. Her friend listened in shock, and then made a chilling discovery: the cafe's staff had no record of anyone named Alex ever visiting that evening. There was no reservation under that name, and none of the staff recalled seeing the man Emily described. Emily was left with a lingering sense of dread. Had she encountered a ghostly apparition, or was it simply a disturbing prank? The mystery of that night remained unsolved, and she could never shake the feeling that something dark and malevolent had followed her. In the months that followed, Emily avoided online dating and always wondered if Alex was just a shadowy figure conjured by her fears or something far more sinister.